Chinese President Xi Jinping is now wrapped up his three-day meeting with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin by pledging to shape a new world order.
Yeah, and listen to this language. Xi told Putin that they are driving changes not seen in a century.
Is the United States dollar under threat? Well, the U.S. dollar became the backbone of the global economy after World War II because of America's robust economy, its democracy, and its transparent regulatory systems, which made the nation seem like a safe place for international investors. But now the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have announced plans to develop a new currency. Their goal is to reduce reliance on the U.S. dollar and other Western currencies as well.
Steve, are they ready for this? China is now trying to replace the U.S. dollar with their currency in global trade. What do you think of that story, Steve?
Well, China, for several years, has made very clear, along with the Russians, they want to downgrade the dollar because they think that'll enhance their power around the world. And certainly the way we've treated the dollar over the year has gone in that direction. However, people are not going to trust the Chinese yuan. You may get these one-off deals like they're doing with the French, but China does not have real capital markets. China has capital controls. And so in terms of currency, people are going to prefer the dollar to the yuan. And so in that sense, I think we've got some time to get our house in order.
But on the other hand, people do believe a little bit of Xi's brokering of the Iran-Saudi Arabia deal not too long ago. He is trying to portray himself as being a world leader.
Right.
Now, it's not that credible in the Western world, but it is becoming more credible in developing countries, and that's really the audience he's aiming at.
And Ambassador, what do you make of the release, the joint statement Putin and Xi release after their meeting, effectively calling the U.S. and its allies a major security
is setting the world for the fulfillment of the prophecy in Revelation 13 verse 17, which says, "And that no one may buy or sell except one who has mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." You might be asking what China is doing that is setting the world for the fulfillment of the prophecy about quote and unquote no buying and selling. Now let's have a look at what China is doing and how it is linked to this prophecy. This digital currency system is now gaining popularity around the world. Unfortunately, at the end of that, you and I will now be subject to a government that may not agree with your opinions, may not agree with your religion, may not agree with the people you hang out with, and they would absolutely restrict your access to that digital currency in an effort to control you. That's how you get fulfillment of the Bible prophecy in Revelation 13 verse 17 that says, "And that no one may buy or sell except one who has mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." The serious issue here is that this digital currency system is being linked to climate change as it spreads around the world. Every movement you make can and will be tracked, and not only that, but tracking also your individual carbon emission. To track your individual carbon emission means they have to get involved in your everyday life activities. For how they are going to accomplish that, watch this video next.
So if our brains are connected, and you record, for instance, what are you possibly thinking, what are you, basically what areas of your brain are being stimulated at a certain point. There is even like devices that can collect what you're seeing, measuring your feelings either through facial recognition devices, micro muscle movements, and so on. These data is going to be stored somewhere, so it might be in a cloud service. What will be this cloud service? Where is the servers being located? Is it in Brazil? Is it in China? Is it in the United States? So depending on the jurisdiction, you have a different approach regarding how that data will be treated. So this is point number one. Point number two is that we become, therefore, sensors. So when you meet a new person and you shake hands, will we have to sign like a privacy notice to talk with that person? Like the person will say, so this is my terms of use, so you have to click this button before we start talking, because everything that we'll be talking will be recorded and so on. This is my privacy notice. And say, no, I don't agree. So, okay, bye-bye, I cannot talk to you. So that's the type of things that we have to think about, because when the human brain and the human body becomes full of sensors, data is being collected, and there is legislation that actually requires the consent of other people in order to collect data about them. So this is sounds like a crazy example, but actually by law that is already required.
All three of the Abrahamic religions teach that lending to the poor is an act of compassion that serves the entire community, and therefore charging interest was seen as immoral. It was called usury and was considered a heinous crime. The Roman Empire allowed usury, but in 1179, the Catholic Church decreed that usury was forbidden. This law did not apply to Jews. While the Torah admonishes usury, Talmudic law allows a Jew to practice usury with a non-Jew, and so money lending became primarily a Jewish business. Over the years, usury became more accepted in Western society, and we've changed the definition with the addendum of charging interest at an excessive rate. In the 17th century, the Bank of England began issuing paper fiat money. This gave the banks the ability to simply print money out of thin air. And for over a century, this was rightfully called out as fraud until it became public policy, known now as fractional reserve banking. What was once seen as immoral is now seen as normal. Many assume that the financial loans given out by the banks are coming from savings they hold for their depositors. But this is not true. When someone takes out a loan, the bank creates new money out of thin air and then charges the person interest to borrow it. Fractional reserve banking allows the banks to legally create 10 times the amount of each deposit. This inflating of the circulating currency devalues that currency and allows the banks an opportunity to profit dramatically. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 began a system of debt designed to inflate beyond its means until it implodes, the exact opposite of sound money. The banking cartel funded both sides of World War I, which led to the Great Depression, which led to the Emergency Banking Act of 1933, which ended the gold standard and made every dollar spent an IOU to further increase the debt, which is ultimately owed by the American people. The banking cartel funded both sides of World War II, which led to the Bretton Woods monetary system, which made the USD the world reserve currency, and gave central banks the option to go straight to the gold window of the US Treasury to exchange US dollars for physical gold. But by endlessly creating more debt, it became clear that the US had printed far beyond their gold reserves. And when several nations came to collect their gold, the federal government dishonorably closed the gold window. To maintain world reserve currency status, the US turned to its military, guns for hire to Saudi Arabia in return for the petrodollar, and war with any nation who threatens USD dominance. A Ponzi scheme is an investment fraud that pays existing investors with funds collected from new investors. And that's what the bankers created. They profit exponentially off the people's debt. It was designed to collapse, and that's what it's doing now. All the markets are crashing, and the derivatives market alone is in the quadrillions, which is much more than the total financial assets of the entire world. There is nothing left to prop up the dollar. This Ponzi scheme is at its end. What that means is that the money you have in the banks will disappear. Everything will go to zero, and then we reset. How we do that will ultimately be up to the people. The banking cartel knows that the only way they can survive this collapse is to somehow convert everyone to an authoritarian CBDC. But without the people's trust, the banks will have problems with this. Many people will lose everything and will want nothing but justice from the old banking system. But many others will comply. Hard times are coming fast, and if we were smart, we'd prepare. Let the big banks die, and create a banking system that serves we the people. Signed in 1787, the U.S. Constitution states that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. In 1791, to help pay for the Revolution, Congress established the first national bank of the United States. Within a decade, it became evident that taxes were being sent to the Crown, and the bank was not renewed. A political battle ensued, which resulted in the formation of America's first two political parties, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. The framers of the U.S. Constitution left out any mention of political parties because they saw them as corrupt relics of the British Crown's divide and conquer system. The second central bank was chartered in 1816 and shut down in 1832 by Andrew Jackson, who wrote that the bank was unauthorized by the Constitution, subversive to the rights of states, and dangerous to the liberties of the people. For nearly a century, America thrived without a central bank, until 1914, when the privately owned Federal Reserve banking system was quietly given power over America's wealth. In 1933, the U.S. government declared bankruptcy, and the Fed shifted to a debt-based economy. And after the U.S. dollar was made the world reserve currency, the entire world became dependent upon debt. A currency backed by nothing but debt and IOUs was doomed to eventually fail from the start, and that day appears to be coming soon. These big banks have funded wars and criminally profited off human suffering for decades. Credit Suisse alone has been fined over 50 times for over $10 billion for money laundering, fraud, espionage, drug trafficking, and stealing money from the people. Every person in the civilized world is now feeling the same financial pressure being subjected by the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank. Nations of the world are buying up record amounts of gold. 3/4 of the world have joined BRICS to prepare for a new world reserve currency after the end of the U.S. dollar. Zimbabwe and Mexico are now joining BRICS. But it's important to remember that the Federal Reserve Bank is operated by BlackRock. BlackRock is operated by the Rothschild City of London banking cartel. And so even if the Fed collapses, BRICS is most likely another proxy of this old banking cartel. The idea for BRICS was born in 2001 from Goldman Sachs. The Federal Reserve Bank's digital currency, FedCoin, is already hugely unpopular. CBDCs are being rejected upon arrival, but that isn't stopping the federal government and the failing big banks from luring the population into their new nightmare system. This July, the Federal Reserve Bank will be launching FedNow and managing practically every transaction made in the United States. Then all they have to do is what the Nigerian central bank just did: shred and destroy mountains of cash and stop filling the ATMs. But we're not slaves yet. And if we want to have financial freedom, then it's time to fight back against the CBDC concept and return to lawful constitutional money. Oklahoma has a law in the works that will protect Oklahomans from being forced to adopt a CBDC. And Florida is now working on a law that will expressly prohibit the use of a CBDC. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis is calling on other state governors to do the same and fight back against CBDC nationwide. At least a dozen states have passed laws to begin accepting gold and silver as cash, on the path to returning to a lawful constitutional money system. Several states have begun printing their own gold backs, a currency shaped like notes made of thin layers of pure gold with a polymer coating, making it easy to spend $1's worth of gold. And the free market has been busy figuring out blockchain banking since the Bitcoin white paper. We don't need a central bank or a government to manage our money. But we have to act now and prepare.